Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome everyone to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am very excited today to introduce you to Margot Andersen, who I had the pleasure of working with many years ago. Margot is the founder of the InSync Network Group. It's a community that supports globally experienced Australians to reconnect their careers, professional networks, and their lives when they return home. Through InSync, Margot has created an amazing environment where returning expats can translate their international experience into local career success, whilst also building genuine connection and confidence through events, learning programs, and the InSync Club. Margot is also the Director of TalentInsight Australia, a leadership and workforce advisory business, and she partners with organisations to help them navigate change, strengthen capability, and build high-performance teams. Her background spans education, sales operations, and talent strategy, and she brings a great understanding of what it takes for both people and organisations to thrive through transition, whether that be coming home, stepping up, or leading through change. Margot, I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for so long. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to sit down with you.
Can you start by sharing with the audience a little bit about your background and how you first came up with the concept of InSync?
Well, to start with InSync, I guess it was born through lived experience. And I think, that quote of, was it adversity is the mother of all invention, is probably where that came from. But like many people, I've had a couple of iterations in my career. As you said, I started in education, and that's what took me to London, actually. And I went for adventure, but stayed for career. So I thought I was going for sort of 9 months, 12 months, and came home nearly 8 years, 7.5, 8 years later. And during that time, I'd changed careers. So I basically worked for the organisation that recruited me out of Australia in the short term. And then another organisation came along and said, look, we're buying education firms, come and work with us on the post-acquisition sort of integration. And that's where I really fell into the world of business and sales operations and had a brilliant time. Like, many big organisations, you have lots of opportunity afforded to you, lots of training. And I just went through the operation director path. So it was brilliant, had a great time. And then I was offered a bigger role to stay. And I thought, right role, wrong country. And I thought, I think I want to rebuild life and career in Australia. So I returned to Melbourne, which is not my home city or even home state. So on one hand, it felt like the adventure continued a little bit. On the other hand, it was like, okay, this is a bit of a rebuild for me on the career front. And I walked headlong into all the challenges that I hear today that expats returning talk about. And so fast forward to today, I've spent I think I've been home now 18 years or 19 years in the world of consulting, talent strategy, and lots of leadership and development programs. And I guess you tell your story a little bit when you're inside organisations or you're talking to people. And I just kept meeting people who would come up to me and say, gosh, I've re-landed, but I haven't re-landed. Or, my brother's home and he can't find a gig, and cousin, sister, auntie, whoever it was, and they were really struggling with this transition around their career. And so I thought, okay, I just don't have that much time to have all those coffees. So I'll start a network group, which I did just before COVID. And it was great. It really thrived and built across Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And it was literally a network. It wasn't a business. It was just a network, it was a great network of professionals who were really looking to reconnect. And I probably didn't anticipate it being much more than that at the time. COVID hit, and being Melbourne-based, couldn't run any event. So I thought, I've got to find a way to keep this community connected. And so started a podcast like you have, Boomeranging. And what was really interesting about that is it put us on the radar not only of people who knew us, but people who didn't know us who were home, or more importantly at the time, people who were overseas. And so we just took loads of inquiries from people who were saying, I'd come home tomorrow if I thought I could get a job. I'd come home tomorrow if I thought that I could have a meaningful sort of transition and career. How do I do that? And I very quickly realized that this is actually a career advisory business or a career transition business, as well as a professional network. And so reskinned a lot of the programs I had in another business for the lens of expats returning. And that's how InSync came to be. So, yeah, lived experience and just knowing that it wasn't, I mean, it felt very personal to me. And I thought, oh, it's me that can't work out this transition. But realizing that I was actually one of many probably launched the business out of that. Mm.
Yeah, amazing. You
Mm.
mentioned there were some challenges that you had when you returned that are still the same challenges that expats have today. Can you
Mm.
elaborate a little bit more on what are those most common challenges that you hear about?
Yeah, I think firstly, many of us underestimate the time, the money, and the efforts that it takes to transition. And I think there's a little bit of I've lived there successfully before. I've worked there successfully before. It won't be that hard. Or I've grown my career. I've got when I left, I had this amount of skills. When I'm coming back, I've got three times as many. So I'll be more marketable. So we underestimate what that actually means. I think it's the lack of visibility that we have around opportunities as expats returning. And for employers and hirers, they have a lack of visibility around where our expats are and what they've been done and what those skills are and could mean for a business. So I think that's definitely a major challenge. I think the other thing that happens is it often throws up an opportunity to reassess what I want to do. And so for many returning expats who've spent long periods of time overseas, they will often say to me, Margot, I know the big gig sits overseas or the big money sits overseas. What I want to do, it's at the right where I'm at the right stage and age of life, and we've got other drivers that are pulling us home. I just want to do meaningful work. And so my question to them is often, well, what does meaningful mean? Because it's really personal. What meaningful means to you and what it means to me are really different things. So I think that taking the time to get super clear around what meaningful means and how you want to work. Lots of people will transition to portfolio careers when they're returning or have an ambition to transfer to portfolio careers or board careers, but you still need a network. You still need visibility. You still need clarity. So I think being really clear about what you want and what the market is offering is really the biggest challenge and where you fit in that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. You and I both know how important networking is when it comes to securing a role, even for people who haven't left Australia,
Right.
particularly at those senior executive levels. What advice do you give to people who feel like they've lost their network whilst they've been away?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think there's a number of things here. I think you and I both share the view that, 80% of our opportunity, we're most likely to get our opportunity through a network or a network that we meet of a network. And so spending time on re-establishing networks and building out new ones is really, really critical. I think the first thing I suggest to people is to map your network and to categorize it. So to go, okay, well, they're people that I worked with, once. And so they're really valuable networks, but they probably don't understand what you've been doing. And you may not understand how they've got to where they've got to in that 15 years that there's been some absence. So there's a little bit of a lens of we need to re educate each other. We need to reconnect and re educate each other. So it's not about looking for a job through that network, it's about re educating with yourself on the market. I think also it's about identifying who you should know that you don't know today. And so platforms like LinkedIn are really valuable for that in terms of research. So who's holding the job that, you might be interested in? Where do they hang out? What networks are they a part of? Just getting under the bonnet of how people meet and engage in the Australian market, I think is really, really important. it's hard because there's definitely a sense of, the market's driven by who you know, not what you know. So you've got to actually activate a network and then work out how you meet that network or the market where it's at. So if you've stepped out of a London or a New York and you've been in the central point of decision making, it's only natural that you would see lots more, just by the sense of where you are in terms of that organisation. So understanding who's who in the zoo, how you can connect with them, how you can introduce yourself to them, how you rebuild your visibility, I think is really important, and how you engage. And you've got to start that early. You've just got to start it early because I think, to go back to the first point, we underestimate the time, the money, the energy that it takes to transition.
Yeah, and look, it can take a lot of time even when you're in Australia, right? It doesn't.
That's right.
What advice do you give to expats to in terms of when they should start that planning process, and how long should they expect to take or land a role when they do arrive?
Yeah. And look, it's really different for different industries. But I mean, typically, I would say to people, you need to put together a robust plan at least 12 months out. So get super clear on what you want, get super clear on what is happening in the market at home, and that takes time. So there's a little bit of reflection for yourself, and then there's a little bit of, okay, research, I guess, that you've got to undertake. But you'll need a year or so to really get under the bonnet of that. I think also if you can re-engage from afar and work out how can I contribute to the network that I want to be a part of from abroad, that's a really powerful way to do it, and to use the position and the location of where you are to sort of connect the dots if that's possible. But I mean, the more senior you are, just by sheer virtue, there's less jobs. So again, it will take longer. So, I mean, I'm working with a couple of people at the moment who are saying, I want to be home in 2 years. And I've got a runway to look at that. I've been gone for 22 years. I've got kids, I've got assets, I've got pensions, I've got all these things I've got to sort out. So there's life and career that need to be planned for, and that they're wanting to return with a job. Conversely, I've got others who are saying, look, I'm coming home and I don't mind if it takes a year. And I'm like, great, because you're going to need a year at that level. We know that certain industries are quite parochial and they like to recruit from within. So understanding what the nuances are from your own industry, I think, is really important. And then again, building presence in that. But I would generally say if you've got a year to transition, that's great, because if you're financially strapped, then you start to be forced into corners to have to make a decision and to entering the market, not necessarily at the level or the role you want to take. And then you face the challenge of having to reposition yourself against where you are today in the local market. So it just is a time factor that you need to really, really plan carefully.
Yeah,
Mm.
some great advice there. What do you think, Margot, are the biggest surprises for expats when they do return home?
I think there's a couple. I think firstly, it is that time, money, and energy. I mean, it's exhausting moving. It's exhausting just moving house locally, let alone moving countries and trying to work out how you get a dog home and kids into school and all those types of things. So I think just the energy that it takes is really important. I think, so surprise factors. I think it's also just around that reverse culture shock factor. It is real. We don't think it is. As I said earlier, I think we've lived here successfully before. We don't think it's going to happen. And that has impacts at a family level as well as a career level, how you re-engage there. But just the way you do business and the way decisions are made here. Australia is a conservative market, and we're conservative decision makers. That slows things down. And so I can remember when I was first coming back, I mean, the organisation that we worked for, I think I spoke to them for 3 months before a decision was made. And I was thinking, gosh, this is extraordinary, and I really didn't have a sense of like which way it was going to go. So you're constantly filling the funnel with new opportunities as well, or new potential opportunities. Yeah, just that transitioning also into business culture, just giving yourself time around that. I do a bit of work with expats who are on expat sort of life cycles with organisations. And coming home with a role is still challenging if you've been away for a long period of time. So not underestimating that either, I think, is really important. Mm.
Interesting. How can returning professionals best position their global experience for the Australian market in your experience?
Yeah, I think that piece around localizing your global experience is really, really important because what we're trying to do is build connection, not objection. And I think that we've got to remember that as somebody who's been outside of the local market, not outside of the market, but outside of the local market, there's already something that you have to make sure you bridge. So it's on you as the returning expat to bridge and build that connection and I guess to demonstrate relevance to the local market. So thinking about your storytelling is really, really important there. I think if we think about written collateral and so LinkedIn, CVs, etc., just be really, really mindful of, the jargon that goes with jobs, or we know that, but also in regions. Look, thinking about if you're positioning signature achievements in terms of outcomes around, euro or US dollars or et cetera, trying to think maybe at a very practical level, percentage impact rather than, the local currency. It just helps bring together, I think, the challenges that you've been solving. And so I always say to people, talk about the challenges you've solved, don't lead with where you've done it. That should be context, not the leader. So yeah, challenges are shared across jurisdictions, across regions. So learn how to tell that story in a manner that uses the local language that identifies where that local market is at and the challenge that's facing. Mm.
Yeah. What are your thoughts around, like, in Australia, we do have a bit of this tall poppy syndrome. Uh,
Mm.
do you see that expats returning perhaps have a better experience or working when they're talking to people who've perhaps also been expats and lived overseas and perhaps value
Yeah,
that global experience rather than perhaps thinking people are returning, like that's their bad luck that they've been out of the
yeah.
country? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think firstly, shared experience just builds connection. Whether or not you're a mum returning to work, an expat returning to the local market, I think when you understand that somebody else has lived it, there's just that sort of acceptance that you can see more broadly than just the words you're hearing. It's definitely something in connecting with others who know that because they have invariably lived the challenge before you and they can say, that's great, Leah. That's amazing. But here, just be careful about how you talk about that. They can be the person that can help you connect the dot. I think they're a very powerful connector to other people and to industry events, et cetera, as well. It's definitely part of my advice around when you're re-establishing networks, connect with others who've lived the experience before you because they're generous because they understand the challenge that you've lived. With regards to the tall poppy syndrome, I think the Australian culture is one of like, we're all equal, and so there's that perception of, well, don't make yourself bigger than what you are. And so upshot of that though is that as expats, we're really conscious of that. So then we learn to say nothing. And so, or we learn to not tell our story. And that's really dangerous as well. So I think it's about knowing and understanding who you can share what parts of your story with others who get it. Or there's plenty of people who are in global roles who haven't been an expat themselves, but they understand what it's like to do business in those roles. So find those people too. So yeah, I think tall poppy is real. It's about us also about how we're going to lean into that, and working out our story and our language for that as well.
Can you tell us a little bit in a bit more detail what you do at InSync and
Yeah.
how do you support expats with their return to Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two components. There's the professional network. So we run events and host events. We've got free events, we've got member events, online and in person. So there is first and foremost the events and community there to lean into. We run strategy sessions and coaching programs. So specifically for those who want to take the time to work through what it is that they want to do upon their return. Is it like for like? Is it expanding into a portfolio? Is it investing? Is it board paths, etc.? So we go through a process of working out what that looks like and, research, tools in the market so that we can help you go, okay, well, you need to really be connecting with this type of audience or these types of people. So how are you going to rebuild your network? So essentially it's a go-to-market strategy. We help people build there. And then we have the InSync Club, which is a bit of a combination of all of the above. So it's a community, it's an online community where we house resources and tools for people to access and use. We have guest speakers that come along and share industry insights or knowledge around transition, specific components around transition. And we also bring back, our alumni and sort of introduce them to say, okay, this is how we did it. So again, that lived experience and shared story. So that's a membership that we've recently launched and we're building out at the moment. So I think there's a number of ways, as I said, be it through free events, be it through member-based events, be it through webinars that we run, online. Some are free again, some are member-based. So yeah, it's really about what do people need. We'll have a solution somewhere in there for them.
I'm sure you will. Margot, I love what you're doing in this area. It's such important work, and I love that you're using your lived experience to help others. For anyone out there who is an expat or is thinking about their return home, I'll put all the links to the InSync Network Group and also to Margot's LinkedIn in the show notes. Margot, is there any other way that people can find you or any other advice that you would like to give?
Well, I think LinkedIn is my playground, so absolutely connect there. And the InSync page on LinkedIn, so we share a lot of resources and knowledge there or articles of interest. I think a great place to start is to listen to other people's stories. So the podcast, Boomeranging Expat to Repat, is a great tool. It demonstrates that or showcases some of the people we have in our network. So, yeah.
Amazing. I'll pop that link in the show notes as well. Yeah. Margot, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Always love catching up with you. You're a wonderful person and you're doing amazing work. So thank you once again and all the best with launching the membership and all the rest of the events for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Leah. I'm surprised we kept it to this length of time. We could talk for ages, I know. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Margot. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.